The Road to Paris, Chapter 20. We are reading The Road to Paris, Chapter 28, A Time to Weed. March melted into April, and the weather began to warm. Time to weed the flower beds, said Mrs. Lincoln on one Saturday over breakfast. Who wants to help? Mr. Lincoln was sleeping in for a change. The boys kept munching their cereal. Arletta popped her last forkful of eggs into her mouth, cleared her plate from the table, and left the kitchen. Lazy bones, thought Paris. Of course, Paris had no idea what weeding flower beds entailed. She'd had little experience with yards and flower beds in New York City. I'll help, she said. David and Jordan exchanged looks, shaking their heads. See you next year, David muttered. Jordan giggled. What? Asked Paris. What? Once Paris looked at it closely, she could see that the entire backyard was a hopscotch of dandelions and clover. She'd be pulling weeds forever. No wonder nobody else wanted the job. Should have kept my big mouth shut, thought Paris. But at least she was outdoors, and she was looking forward to seeing the garden in full bloom. It wouldn't kill her to help the garden get that way, now would it? Paris set to work around the hydrangeas. She used a small spade to break the ground and loosen it up like Mrs. Lincoln told her, so she could yank the weeds, root and all. The soil was teeming with critters. Paris had to shake off ants several times, and more than once disturbed an antworm who didn't appreciate being exposed to the sun. How do they see down there? Paris wondered. And look how fast they move. Fascinated, Paris was doing more watching than weeding. If she hadn't, she'd never have seen the snake. It won't hurt you, said David suddenly behind her. Garter snakes aren't poisonous. That was all Paris needed to hear. Good, she said. I think I'll keep it then. I don't know about that, said David. But Paris had already picked the small snake up, and before he knew it, she'd run into the house to show off her new pet. David and Jordan ran in after her. Mom, Mom, look what I found, called Paris, banging into the house. Mom, where are you? In the living room. Paris bounded into the room. She was muddy from the spring-wet ground. Mom, look! She shoved the snake under Mrs. Lincoln's nose. Mrs. Lincoln gasped, her eyes nearly crossing. Get that thing out of here, she said in a clipped and dangerous voice. But Mom, said Paris, inching even closer, it's a garter snake, see? Out, ordered Mrs. Lincoln. Now. Behind her, Paris could hear muffled laughter. As she retraced her muddy steps, the boy stumbled a few feet ahead of her, doubling over with laughter. That was funny, said David, once they were back outside. Paris felt her jaw tighten. Mrs. Lincoln had all but taken her head off. Paris was in no mood for laughter. Worst of all, she didn't even know what she'd done wrong. Mom's scared of snakes, explained Jordan. Can't stand 'em, added David. Well, you could have told me, snapped Paris, returning the snake to the soil. I didn't get a chance, said David. He had to wipe tears from his eyes. Besides, I'm glad I didn't. Man, did you see the look on her face? I thought her eyes were going to pop right out of her head. David erupted in laughter again, and this time Paris joined him. Imagine, thought Paris, Mom being afraid of something, of anything, least of all a little old snake. Somehow, the thought of it made Paris love her more. Well, that's the end of chapter 28. And even the strongest person has something that makes them uncomfortable. And that Paris learned that about Mrs. Lincoln in this chapter. Well, join us again. I should say join me again in chapter 29, where we'll have more adventures on the road to Paris. See you then.